Hey guys, good morning. Tuesday, 7 o'clock, Florida, 7 Eastern Time, it's on the 13th. Anyway, good Bible study morning. Hey, we've been going through the book of First Peter, and we're going to continue that study today. You know, what's interesting is I've done 2 half-hour sessions so far, and only got through verse 5. You know, and one of the things, the takeaways for, you know, about the amount of time that it takes to get through, you know, a good thorough Bible study is how you kind of parse verses, and you're looking at word usage in, you know, from the original, in this case, Greek, and you know what the meanings of those Greek words were when they used those words, and then also how were those words used in other verses, you know, such as books written by Paul or, you know, some of the other disciples or the apostles. And then, you know, but each time we have to be very careful when we do that. So we have to take into mind the context in which the letter was written, who the letters were written to, and then what those folks were experiencing that they were writing the letters to. Hey, I'm going to be right back. So today we're gonna kick off starting with verse 5, but kind of as a recap, you know, Peter had written his first epistle to what he refers to as the elect exiles, people that were exiled in what is modern day Turkey today in several provinces, kind of spread out some of those areas. And you know those people were experiencing some form of persecution. Now, by most historical scholars, it's not that they were experiencing physical persecution or violence or anything of that nature, but they were definitely experiencing, you know, ridicule, verbal abuse, and it's very likely that some of that verbal abuse was also transitioning into some form of violence, you know, here and there. But they were, you know, I guess they were being discouraged. You know, the letter doesn't really say why Peter wrote the letter to them, other than that they were being persecuted. But I'm sure he was getting word that they were getting discouraged. Maybe they were getting ready to throw in the towel. Maybe they were ready to give up. I don't really know. But that's what he was writing the letter to them. So when you take these books of these letters that the disciples and apostles were writing, is how do you apply that to us today? So you know today we have people that sometimes they feel persecuted. Now you may not be persecuted by government, though you might. You know, depending on your views of what's happening in the world today. But sometimes you can feel persecuted in your workplace. You can feel with your neighbors in your block. You can feel persecuted by your own family. We're talking about a little bit of verbal sarcasm. You know, trying to ridicule you, trying to belittle your faith, and that sort of thing. And again, sometimes that can lead into violence. This was taken by most scholars agree that this letter was written at a time where it was just before Rome was burned. And of course, the blame for Rome burning in around the 64 BC time, blame was placed on Christians, and then there was severe persecution against Christians after that. So, but most scholars believe that this letter was written before a lot of that started to occur. But the key thing is that so he was writing it to people that were exiled. And again, we're not talking about exiles necessarily in the sense that they were exiled from their home countries and they were living as expats in those regions. He's also referring to the fact that we, as believers of Christ, are exiled on earth because we are, of course, citizens of heaven, of the spirit of heaven, and we are exiled on earth. And he calls them elect exiles, which means that these people were chosen by God based on his foreknowledge, meaning that he knew ahead of time that he was going to cause them to be born again and become part of his children. Which, of course, with that, as chapter 1 continues, is he's talking about how, you know, that we were saved according to his great mercy, and that he caused us to be born again. So, you know, again, each of us have our own different born again stories. I can tell you that mine was very physical, where I could literally feel the knocking, and it was a very physical experience for me. So mercy being that he gave us what we didn't deserve, right? It was the remedy to the sin that we were already under. but is born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, because we also will be resurrected into eternity once we experience the physical death on earth. And then Peter gets into the idea of the inheritance. And the inheritance that we will receive in heaven is imperishable. It means it cannot die, it cannot decay, it cannot be tarnished by sin, it cannot be tarnished by anything of the world, as he compares that to the types of inheritance that we know of that's on earth. Gold and silver and money and property and those sorts of things. But everything that you inherit on earth dies away and decays. There's nothing to really look forward to in the long term. But of course, our inheritance will be awaiting for us in heaven. It's reserved for us in heaven. So, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his great mercy has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to obtain an inheritance which is imperishable and undefiled and will not fade away. It is reserved for you in heaven. It is reserved in heaven for you. And so today we're going to start on verse 5. So verse 4 ended with you, and then verse 5 continues with that thought. So you, who are protected by the power of God through faith, for a salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. So not only is the inheritance from verse 4 secure, but so is the believer, you and I. We are also secure. So the power of God, a power that stands fast, it's ready to fight the evil intentions of the devil, right, is the same power that is used to maintain the believer's faith, our faith. So salvation in verse 5 continues with this description of inheritance that was used in verse 4 and the description of hope that was talked about in verse 3, right? We have a hope for a future. But here, salvation is used in a future tense. It's talking about something that happens in the future. So this salvation is to be revealed to us in a future time. So that's usually referred to as the end time. So bear with me. So this is going to dabble a little bit into an eschatology. Eschatology is the study of end times. So I know everyone talks about, we study end times prophecy through, in the book of Revelation, or what you read about that Paul wrote in various letters that he wrote. So your eschatology is basically what your belief is as it relates to end time prophecy or the second coming of Christ. So I'm going to dabble just a tad bit into that, and hopefully this doesn't have any type of a conflict, with anybody else's beliefs or anything. But anyway, so our salvation is in the end time is already an accomplished fact. It's promised to us. It's going to happen. But between today and then, we are going to experience persecution. But we can be satisfied. We can still experience joy today. That's what Peter's trying to say. Even though we're going through a period of persecution, and the knowledge of what is going to happen for us in the future. So it's been prepared and it's ready. So we have now seen in only 5 verses, we have seen where salvation is used in 3 different tenses. In the past tense, which is the act of your justification. So it's the act of your justification. It was an act. It was when you chose to, yes, I believe in you, Lord, and you did, and you accepted him into your heart as your Lord and Savior, and you confessed, everything that needed to be confessed. So in the past, you were justified. In the present, right, it's with our ongoing process of sanctification. So sanctification is something that happened, that starts from the moment you were justified, and it will continue all the way until the second coming of Christ, right? So in the future, that is referred to as glorification. So your salvation is accomplished through your justification, through the process, which is an act, through the sanctification process that you are ongoing for the rest of your life, and then in the future is the glorification. And so Peter is making a reference to salvation in verse 5 as pertaining to the future glorification and the moment that you will actually receive. that is the moment that you are going to receive your inheritance. So we are saved today, but we are simply waiting for the final a ratification of sin in our future resurrected body. So the last time refers to the coming of Christ. Now, again, this is where you can get into the idea of rapture. So the gathering of both the living and dead believers in the air. So, which is what's quoted from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 18. So in 1 Thessalonians, we see, but we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who are asleep, meaning people that have already perished and buried in the ground, so that you will not grieve as do the rest who have no hope, right? So don't grieve as to those who rest as compared to those who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him, Jesus, those who have fallen asleep, who have died, that believed in Jesus. They were in Jesus. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep, those who died. And again, we're talking about the people that have died, that believed and accepted Jesus Christ. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. So those who are asleep, right, those who are dead in Christ will rise first. And then those who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, so that we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore, comfort one another with these words. So you're either going to, if you're, one or two things is going to happen. When you die, the physical death, you are going to, and you are a Christ believer and a Christ follower, you are going to fall asleep in a spiritual sense, right? But then you will rise to meet Christ in heaven. If you are presently on the earth when this time occurs, then you will then follow those that rose after that. So look, this is, again, it's known as eschatology, where the debate of a rapture and end times events, it's going to continue. The bottom line is we're not really going to know until the actual event occurs. So whether you believe in a pre-rapture, pre-tribulation rapture, or tribulation rapture, any of that kind of stuff, that's not necessarily the point that we're trying to make here. So the point that really, the biggest point is that when you perish, you're going to spend the rest of your life with Jesus. Or if you're still alive during his second coming, then you're going to live the rest of your life with Jesus. And that's the comfort that Peter is trying to exemplify in this letter. So therefore, no matter what it is you're suffering, no matter what it is that you're going through right now, it doesn't matter. Look to your inheritance. Look to your glorification, right? Whatever you're going through today doesn't compare to the joy that you're going to have in the future. So Peter is lifting our minds to what is going to be revealed. He's reminding us that God is going to protect us through his power by sustaining our faith all the way until the end. Notice he doesn't say physical lives, and again, he's referring to our faith. It's God's supreme power. It's his omniscience and his omnipotence that is sovereign over our future inheritance. But it's also keeping the believer secure in our faith today, right? So his power is sovereign over your future inheritance, but his power is also supreme in keeping your faith secure today. No one can steal your treasure, right, your inheritance, and no one can disqualify you from receiving it. But you can disqualify it yourself. You can disqualify yourself from your inheritance, and you can also disqualify yourself from an eternal future with Jesus. And so we have to remain on guard, right? No matter when you're being persecuted, whatever you're going through, don't give up on your faith. Do not give up on your faith. The believer's response, meaning yours and mine, to God's election and the Spirit's conviction is faith. But even faith is empowered by God, which you can also read about in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. And it's our continued faith in God that is the evidence of God's keeping power. And so at the time of our salvation, yours and mine, God has energized our faith, and he continues to preserve it. It is permanent, and it never dies. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, which we reference, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, right, your faith is a gift of God. So all of that in one verse, right? In verse 5. So we continue on into verse 6. In this, right? In this, the power of the Lord in his preservation of your future salvation, right? In this you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, right? A little while on earth, if necessary, that you have been distressed by various trials. So whatever we're going through right now on earth is temporary. It's got an end date, right? It's got an end date, no matter what. No matter what you're going through, it has an end date. Versus what we get to look forward to in the future is eternity, right? So Peter says to believers that we need to greatly rejoice at the prospect of being a part of the elect, right? The elect, the chosen, that where God chose us. We were elected by God. We were chosen by God. So at the prospect of being part of the elect, God's mercy and his grace, our salvation and our inheritance, as our rejoicing more than compensates for being distressed by various trials. Trials that are temporary, though it doesn't feel like it at the time. Let's be honest, right? So some in the military, we have we give a lot of briefings and we give a lot of orders, and sometimes we will brief things that they brief well, but then executing it and going through it is a completely different story, right? So yes, trials that we're going through right now, they don't feel temporary because we are presently feeling them at the time. But look, the truth is, if you really relax, whatever it is you're going through, at some point you know that trial has an end, that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So in the Greek, the word for trials can also be translated as temptations. So sometimes it's not necessarily a trial where we're being persecuted by somebody else, but we are feeling distressed based off of things that tempt us. So if you are someone that has an issue with pornography and you're constantly tempted to participate in whatever it is that you participate in when it comes to pornography, or if you're an alcoholic, there's a lot of temptation to grab that beer or that whiskey or that whatever it is that you drink. If you have an issue with drugs, be it Oxycontin or marijuana, crystal meth, or whatever, right? There's that temptation that you're fighting to not get a hold of some of that material. What about the temptation to punch somebody in the face, right? What about that temptation where somebody is really pissing you off, right? And you just want to physically, do something, or you just want to go off on a rant and belittle the person, right? That is saying something to you, or maybe they're saying something against your family. I'm not talking about a right not to defend yourself. You're going to have to go with whatever leadings that you think you need to have. But sometimes we could be tempted to do something verbally or physically to someone else that might be a molehill and not a mountain, right? So, sometimes our emotions get a hold of us and we make something bigger than it is. And so you have to fight that temptation of your flesh to lash out, again, either verbally or physically, and belittle. And remember, everybody's a child of God, and we have to remember that. And that's hard. That's very hard, especially in the climate that we have today, right? It's hard not to lash out and at others. But, we have to fight that. That's, again, the trials, right? We're distressed via our temptations. So to be exceedingly glad or exuberantly jubilant, right? To be exceedingly glad or exuberantly jubilant, right? What does that mean? It just means that you're going to be happy. Sometimes, I get a kick out of the Christianese, or the way that we spiritualize with, $25 words, some things. But to be exceedingly glad or exuberantly jubilant means that you're just really happy. It's a kind of joy that's not based on a changing temporal circumstance, meaning temporary. But it's a kind of joy that comes from an unchanging, eternal relationship with God. So we can be exuberantly happy, right? We can be thrilled, not because of stuff that's going to change on the earth, right? But because of the unchanging, eternal relationship with God. So Peter relates this joy to the assurance that our future inheritance is protected and the assurance about our proven faith, right? About one's proven faith. So Peter teaches several important principles about trouble in this verse. Trouble does not last. It's going to end. Trouble serves a purpose. It serves a purpose. If you're a thin-skinned person, then sometimes trouble, right, can thicken your skin so that in the future that similar type of trouble can bounce off of you. It doesn't really impact you at all. Trouble does bring turmoil. Trouble comes in a lot of different forms. And again, we're talking about, remember, temptations. And it can be verbal. It can be violent. It could be the temptation for you to participate in a substance or an act that you know is of sin, or whatever. But also trouble should not diminish. It should not diminish the Christian's joy. So whatever you're going through, it should not impact your joy, right, in your relationship with Jesus. So rejoicing in trials is something that's also talked about in the book of James, chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. And it serves, so rejoicing in trial serves as proof of your faith. It serves as proof of your faith. So, and this thought will continue into verse 7. So, but let's go back and look at what does James say in chapter 1. Well, James tells us in chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, consider it joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. We're also talking about temptations. Knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And then you let that endurance have its perfect result so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And I'm probably going to get into this in verse 7, but basically when you're going through trials and you're maintaining your faith, it also gives you confidence in the purity of your faith. So some people that think that they have joy in God and, Lord, praise God and all that kind of stuff until they're going through a trial. And then what happens? They're miserable. Where's God? This sucks. Their faith starts to degrade, right? It starts to lapse. And so that's where we as brothers, right, need to be there for that brother at the time that he's going through that trial, because sometimes that brother needs to rely on our faith, right, to keep him lifted up. Now, once that trial is over, then that brother will have to have a discussion with the Lord about why did his faith wane, and then have to rely on others, right? But if you are someone that can go through a trial and still express joy in no matter what's happening in your life, then that just to me, in Scripture, is a sign that your faith is much more pure rather than, the faith that you're feeling at the time when things are going well for you. So, I'm thinking about a time when I was in Hawaii. We played softball, so all the different battalions had softball teams, and we would play each other. So you'd have, in our case, it was our signal battalion. We had a softball team, and then we'd play against infantry battalions, artillery, MPs, whatever. And there was this one game in particular that we were getting our butts whipped, man. I mean, the score was like, they had 9 and we had 2. It was really bad. But what happened was that we in the signal battalion at the time, we were having fun. And actually, we were teasing ourselves for losing and laughing. And every time something bad would happen to us, we would laugh, and just have a good time. Well, what was happening was it was an infantry battalion, and they were getting mad that we were still expressing joy and happiness, even though we were getting our butts kicked, and it was aggravating them. They were winning. We were losing. But we were showing more joy and having a good time than they were having in winning. And it made them mad. And they would yell, but how can you guys, be expressing all this joy and happiness when you're losing? It was just boggling their minds. And then what happened was their anger and their frustration with our happiness just made us express our joy even more. So because we saw they were getting angry, we started to tease them for their anger. And so they were getting angrier. We were expressing more joy and having a good time, and it just kept making them angrier and angrier. And the angrier and angrier they got, right, the happier, more joyful, we were. And it's just that scene. I wasn't a Christian at the time, but I remember thinking, wow, is how can someone that's winning, right, be miserable while someone else that is losing still express joy and happiness? And that was just something that kind of really stuck with me. And again, I'm not going to say that again I wasn't a Christian, but that to me is a cool story to share, that whatever you're going through in your life, and when you're being persecuted or somebody is lashing out and attacking you, you can still express joy. And then watch how that person gets mad that you are still joyful. What's going on. And that serves as a witness to people. So if there are people that know that you're going through something really bad, maybe it's financial, maybe it's something with your family, grief, who knows. But if there are people, especially the non-Christians, that know that you're going through some form of a trial, but yet you're still joyful as if that trial wasn't even happening, that serves as a witness. And then that is something that causes that non-believer to want what you have. And I think that's one thing that Peter is trying to tell us here is, that when you're going through trials, rejoice anyway, because you know what the future has for you. And that can serve as a witness for those around you. I'm going to go a little bit over. I want to continue through verse 7. And again, I'd really try to stick to these being 30-minute studies. But I want to continue this thought about rejoicing in trials. So in this greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by various trials, so that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold, which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So Peter goes on to show in verse 7 how the hope of salvation comes to bear upon a believer's endurance, right, during the trials and the temptations, a message that he continues through all the way up and through verse 9. So God does not need proof of faith. But people, we regularly do feel it necessary to prove our faith. So Peter's reference to proof of faith is more for the benefit of the one with faith as a form of evidence and encouragement as we experience trials and tribulations. So it builds your confidence as you're going through trials and or fighting temptations, and then you make it through where you don't follow through with whatever your body is being, your flesh is wanting to do. That builds your confidence about proof of faith. So that proof of faith is more for you than for God. God knows, He sees your heart. He knows where your faith is. So when we face a trial or we feel that we're personally persecuted, we may experience a measure of fear, right? We're gonna experience a measure of fear, uncertainty, and we're gonna falter. We may falter, right? Some people are definitely better at it than others, but we may falter momentarily. It could be for a few minutes. I've talked about in the past about how we had this debate about the difference between worry and fear. I worry about my kids and some things that they're dealing with. I don't know if that's fear, though worry is a form of fear, but either way. And for me, sometimes my worry can last a half hour, 5 minutes, or an hour. But the point being is that somewhere in a very short amount of time, I'm not worried about it anymore. So even though you may temporarily falter, that's okay, right? But our faith will eventually overcome that temporary degree of uncertainty or that temporary degree of fear that you were feeling. So as we continue to face more trials in the future, right, it's our memory of our past victories over those episodes of fear and doubt and uncertainties that give us greater confidence and consistency in exercising our faith today and likely in the future. So Peter is comparing a believer's faith to gold. He's comparing a believer's faith to gold. And that your faith is much more precious than gold. Gold's real value isn't realized until it's been what he said, tried and refined. So gold's real value isn't until it's been melted and smelted, and it's been refined into bars and coins and things that can be used as currency. So gold that has been tested by fire is pure and it's precious, and there is no shortcuts or easy ways to remove the dross and the impurities. Right. So you melt when you're melting metals, the impurities of that metal, be it gold, silver, whatever, float to the surface, and you scoop that stuff off, right, and then throw it away. And then what's left is something that is more pure. So if we replace the word gold with faith, we get that faith's real value won't be realized until it has been tried and refined. Faith that has been tested by fire is pure and precious, and there is no shortcuts or easy ways to remove the dross and impurities. The dross and impurities for faith is doubt and uncertainty and fear. So the metaphor of being tested by fire is a phrase that has been written about and taught extensively for centuries, right? Tested by fire, man. It's used in movies, TV shows, and all kinds of things, right? It's a phrase that's used frequently in secular environments. It's a reference to the refining of metals and is a very appropriate description for the testing of a believer's faith. So when you're smelting metals, see, I already got ahead of myself. The smelter removes the dross, the impurities that floats to the surface and discards it, allowing the metal to become more pure. When it comes to the idea of believers, the impurities reference include your fears, your uncertainties, and your doubts that come to the surface during the times that are testing your faith. And so as this process continues over time, your faith comes more readily and more pure and stronger in the future because you've been getting rid of a lot of those fears and uncertainties. And as you get through it, as you're going through a current trial, you're going to remember what it is that you experienced in the past, and it gives you confidence that you can get through it. And so sometimes getting through a trial or getting through a temptation happens faster because your faith is there and it's ready. So what's left is a deposit that's going to result, right, in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ, right? So the lesson here is that even gold is tested by fire is temporary. Faith is spiritual gold. Faith tested by fire retains its nature just like gold does. Only faith tested by fire is genuine faith. Tested by fire is a gift of grace, right? How we manage ourselves. Do we walk through that trial with grace? When we are tested by fire, Jesus is revealed. Let me go back to that tested by fire about how you're with faith and it's a gift of grace. Is sometimes when we're experiencing something, we can lash out at others around us. It's not that the people around us have done anything. It's just that, between the stress and the anxiety and the doubts and the uncertainty and all those negative type emotions that you're feeling will cause you to lash out at others. But if you handle that situation with grace, you won't act out. So hurting people hurt people. We've heard that before. So as you're going through a trial, you're hurting. And sometimes that causes you to hurt others. So you have to remember to handle everything you're going through with grace. It's nobody's necessarily their fault of what's happening around you for the most part. So when we're tested by fire, Jesus is revealed, right? Grace, then Jesus is revealed. So we rejoice when tested by fire. And so when our faith is tested, the impurities of our old self are removed and they are thrown away, which allows our faith to be more pure, which serves as evidence and encouragement when we experience future trials. And I don't have it in my notes here, but we can't remember or we can't forget how sometimes when we're going through a trial and the way that we manage ourselves with grace, right, and with joy, right, that serves as a witness to non-believers. Or perhaps there's a Christian brother that's also going through something. And so sometimes when they see you going through it, it convicts them that, hey, I don't need to feel like I'm feeling. I can still express and feel joy in whatever it is that brother is going through. So we can serve as a witness to non-believers, but we can also serve as a witness to Christian brothers that are actively in a trial themselves. So this kind of faith has a great reward. It serves as evidence of the revelation of who Jesus Christ is. Honor and praise belong to both believers and to Christ. So therefore, this one begs, a question. Does God allow troubles to occur? Does God allow troubles to occur? So if so, what would his purpose be, right? So if God allows troubles to occur, what's his purpose? Well, God's purpose in allowing trouble may be, I don't want to, challenge anyone's theology or doctrines. So God's purpose in allowing trouble may be to test the reality of one's faith. So it could be that the trouble is to test the reality of your faith. But the benefit of such testing by fire is for the Christian. It's for you. It's for me. It is not for God. So when a believer, when you and I come through a trial, still trusting in our Lord Jesus Christ, then we are assured that our faith is genuine. And if there is one thing a 21st century man needs more than ever, right, is confidence in our faith. We need confidence in our faith, right? Because things, if you look at when we look at the world, look ridiculous. They look silly, and so sometimes it's our faith that gets us through it. But I look at it, I enjoy, my favorite part is the evidence to yourself that your faith is as strong as you thought it was or that you believed it was, but it also serves as a witness to others around you through the power of observation. And I think that that's extremely powerful. And I think that that's what men need today, and I think that's what our nation needs today. All right, so I went about 9 minutes over. Anyway, God bless you guys. And again, I love this tribe, The one thing that I really wish people would comment openly. I love your messages. I love your words of encouragement. I love the text messages. I do enjoy the private messages, but I would encourage you is instead of messaging me privately or texting me, ask yourself why you are struggling with commenting in the open. I mean, right now the tribe is a small tribe. We'll see what the Lord's going to provide or bring into the tribe over time. But we should be encouraged to share with each other whatever our thoughts are on certain topics. And again, keeping it focused on the heart of the man and that kind of thing. And so I would encourage you. I love your messages. I do, and I love your text messages. They encourage me because it shows me that people are watching and they're enjoying what it is that I'm doing here. But I would encourage you to comment openly and let others know, because we encourage each other, right? So iron sharpens iron, right? That's kind of the mantra of men's ministry, is iron sharpens iron. Well, we can only sharpen iron if we are talking and we operate as a community. And we should not be isolated whatsoever. I was telling a brother the other day that these videos, I do these at 7 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I get 1 or 2 viewers that come on live. I don't care about that. I don't. So doing these videos is more for me than it is for others, to be quite honest. I do hope that others watch the videos and they're blessed by them. Don't mistake me. But I have an issue with doing videos. I've shared that in the past. And so this is doing a lot for me to get across my fears, right? My uncertainties about the way that I behave in front of a camera. I'm someone that feeds off of a crowd. I've done public speaking in front of 1,000 people before, and it's wonderful. It's awesome. Doing it in front of a camera is not awesome for me, and because I can't feed off of the crowd, so I can't see people. But the words of encouragement y'all give me later, privately, are encouraging, but I would encourage you to speak openly because we are a community. Don't isolate yourself, right? And sometimes you have a word that can help others. Sometimes you have something to share, but you're afraid to share it because you feel silly or you're embarrassed by it. Don't feel silly. Don't feel embarrassed by it. Write what it is that you feel the Lord is telling you, because that word may bless another brother. You just don't really, you may not necessarily see it in the natural. Members of this tribe are all over the country. We've got some folks in Washington State. We've got folks in Arizona. We've got folks in Tennessee. We've got folks in Kentucky. We've got folks in Florida. So we're all over the nation. We're never really going to see each other in a physical presence. I mean, I'm thinking about doing Zoom meetings in the future, but we'll see where that takes us. So sometimes you put a word in here and a brother sees it, right? That is the word that another brother needs. So anyway, guys, love y'all, and God bless.